Welcome to episode 33 of the Most Serious Podcast. In today's episode, I talk to Chetan Narang, who is the host of the Unlearning Playground podcast. Chetan has been working in the tech industry for the last 6 to 7 years, but in today's episode, we didn't talk about software or technology. We discussed everyday philosophy with Chetan. I myself am very curious when it comes to the topic of philosophy. I haven't read or listened to many podcasts or audiobooks of philosophy, but I always find this a very intriguing topic to converse about. Chetan has, on the other hand, read a lot of books. His podcast is also about philosophy and spirituality. In today's episode, I asked him a lot of questions which all of us at some point in our lives have related to. Like, do we even have a purpose on this earth? What is a purpose? Does discussions like these have any intrinsic value to them? Chetan has a very clear way of thinking. He has a certain approach to answer these questions, and he has a very good storytelling element to him. I enjoyed a lot talking to him. I hope you like the conversation today. Let's get into the episode now. Chetan Narang is on the Most Serious Podcast. Now, जब आप देख रहे हो, when you're looking at this guy, so you don't know what we're going to talk about. Sometimes you might feel a bit of technology is going to be discussed because he's from a software background. या फिर we're going to discuss about engineering colleges. ऐसा कुछ तो नहीं कर रहे आज. Let's talk about philosophy. How about that, Chetan?
Yes, I think so, Ripu. Thank you for that, dude. And I think really the most irrelevant part of this discussion today, आज शायद यही हो कि मैं engineering background का हूँ या जो भी. Let's go into those tangents of philosophy and spirituality and all of that.
Yeah, man. I mean, you are an engineering passer. You're senior to me. I think you passed your engineering college in 2014, right?
Yes, yeah.
And I am in my final year अभी. तो 8 साल की engineering की और difference hai, and we're going to discuss philosophy. Let's see how this goes. I'm excited to talk
Definitely.
to you, man.
Same here. Looking forward to this.
How does exactly one go from a CS background or someone studying CS to thinking about or reading about or actively getting interested in philosophy? How does that happen?
Yeah. So again, this has been asked to me quite a lot of times. In fact, ये almost पहला सवाल होता ही है हर बार. Whenever I introduce myself and I tell people कि हाँ, I'm an engineer, yeah, I work in the software engineering industry, and my podcast is not at all about any kind of product development या जो भी. My podcast is about spirituality and philosophy. तो ये सवाल आता ही है, right? And for me, I think it just happened. It just happened. For me, I always tell this story in a manner ki when I started reading books, when I started reading different books, as in right from my childhood, I'd been a studious kid, top of the class kind of a kid. So I had read only academic books till that time. And I think around 7-8 years ago, when I started reading those other books, not even 7-8 years, I think, it's been 4-5 years now. So when I started reading other books, starting especially with this book, Thinking Fast and Slow. So I read. Oh, you've heard of that book? Daniel Kahneman?
I started reading it. A friend of mine suggested it. I started reading it. I think I'm at chapter 2 or something. He uses these terms called system 1, system 2. So he was explaining those.
Yeah,
I think I've read the first 45 odd pages of that. Yeah.
Good. You're already into it, because I would definitely recommend reading that. So that book, when I came across that book, I was in a stage in my life when, there was a lot of dissatisfaction overall, and I was trying to figure out a lot of different things in my life. I was trying to sort out different places. Okay. Mostly external, mostly related to my job and what do I want to do in my career and all of that. And जब वो book मैंने पढ़ी, just even halfway through that book, I could see so it's basically, if you would go into the depths of it, that book is basically about how humans think, how we think.
Yeah.
And that was something I had never done previously. मैंने कभी नहीं सोचा था कि मैं सोचता कैसे हूँ, right? Like this inward transition की, before you sort out everything outside, sort out in here. ये कभी नहीं सोचा था. So when I read that book, just halfway through it, I would say I could get this feeling कि a lot of things that I had cemented in my mind, a lot of thoughts, a lot of opinions in my mind were coming from very incomplete standpoints. And that triggered a lot of change here. I realized ki this is something I need to work on firstly before actually trying to look at other things. So, and that led me to spirituality and philosophy too going on. So matlab, like I would say ki it just opened my bounds. It just opened me to just looking for everything. Ki I might be wrong in a lot of other places too. Jaise
Uh,
we're talking about ki I was an engineer, I am an
yeah.
engineer, and I'm talking about spirituality. Back in the day when I was a teenager in my early college days, I was also an atheist, and I
Hmm.
was a staunch atheist. So when I was reading this book, I definitely remember those moments ki I could see कि यार since I was coming from incomplete standpoints, मैंने चीजें इतनी depth में नहीं सोची थी.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong even here. And again, like I say, it opened me up to just even exploring that part of life, you know. And and today we are sitting here discussing spirituality. So what?
Yeah, that thing is so true. I don't know, for me, like, has any such event, or I would call it kuch major thing that has happened into my life, just say you sometimes get a nudge on, you start thinking
Mm.
about thinking, you start thinking about your ideas,
Yeah.
your of the world, your worldview.
Yeah.
So you don't know
Mm-hmm.
ki event triggers that, or just sometimes a mindset shift happens because of some things that happened, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
having that realization of that you are so set in your ways mentally, and
Mm-hmm.
more mentally than physically. So sometimes we think that
Yeah.
changing physical habits is tough, but
Mm-hmm.
there's so much of predefined structure already present in our brains, in our minds, the way we
Yeah.
process things,
Yeah.
the way we talk with people, the way
Huh.
we understand what people are saying to us, the way we
Yeah.
interpret
Yeah.
things. A lot of
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
has already been concretely laid out in our minds.
Exactly. And when that shift happens, when you realize ki everything that is going into you is actually going via this predefined mental model, you
uh,
want to unlearn what is false, right? You want to unlearn what actually is not suiting you, what actually is not based on facts, what
hmm,
could be based on just things you picked up along the way. So,
yeah.
and it very often happens ki things that hurt us in our lives, things that leave some blows on us, also tend to close us. तो
Hmm,
उस सेंस में फिर क्या होता है कि यू स्टार्ट टू परसीव एवरीथिंग वाया दैट फिल्टर एंड जस्ट
yeah.
रियलाइजिंग कि इट इज अ फिल्टर that goes a long way towards actually going towards the truth. So yeah, definitely. Yeah.
मेरे को तो I
Mm.
had this realization. I think, don't know if it's fair to call it a realization, but also just had this fleeting thought, or had this moment while I was just meditating once, and I've stumbled across
Mm.
meditation in I don't know, class 11th probably. And I used to
Wow.
do those
Yeah.
guided meditations, headspace
Mm.
and calm and all of that
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So once it was so cool to kind of have this feeling of, when you're able to step outside of your mind, and you're able to
Mm.
see that how chattered, the whole place is. Sometimes, your mind is
Yeah.
full of so many thoughts and so many ideas, and it's just
Yeah.
non-stop
Yeah.
an internal talk
Huh.
that is going on. And once you
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of just step out of it and realize that you're not your mind, and
Mm.
you're something
Yeah.
else. You are able to see
You're
your mind.
something that can observe that.
Yes,
You're
exactly.
something
So
that can
if you
observe that. Yeah.
if you're able to
Mm.
see your mind, then you're definitely not your mind, right? You're able to
Exactly.
step
Yeah.
out of it. So that
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
blew me away, man. And I
Yeah.
don't know, is that consciousness? You've certainly studied a lot than me, but
Mm-hmm.
what is consciousness?
Consciousness. Yeah, consciousness is actually a very broad term overall, but in some sense you can understand consciousness in terms of what is your I in the terms of the letter I, not the
Okay.
organ I, the
Yeah.
letter I. So what you call your I is your consciousness.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So as in I saying that, like you just said, um, before you actually realize this, your I, your identity would be confused with all the whirlwind of thoughts that are going on in your minds, in
Mm,
your mind, right?
yeah.
And that is the limit of your consciousness. But the moment you realize that, oh, I can actually observe these thoughts, I can actually observe this whirlpool of thoughts going on in my mind, you realize that I, like your consciousness, these thoughts are just appearing within your consciousness. They are not really you, right?
Yes. True.
Does that
100%.
make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of
So
course.
in that sense, you just expanded your consciousness. You just expanded what you are aware of. So in that sense, your consciousness is kind of, if I would try to explain it to you, your consciousness is kind of the limit to which you are aware of reality. In some sense, your consciousness is that, right? You are conscious of this. You are conscious of this. Of course, there's a lot more technicality to it. What you would call consciousness, maybe if we keep on talking about this and talk about meditations a lot, we reach something called universal consciousness. We can talk about that too, right? But in essence, if you have never studied consciousness before, you've never, delved into it, just try and understand consciousness as nothing but your I. Like, your consciousness is your I, what you identify with.
And there's also this thing. So my sister was sometime reading a book. There's this guy called Freud. I guess he's the father of he's a father of too many things in psychology, I guess. But so she introduced me to a term called collective consciousness, and that's apparently a thing that as a society or as a group of people together, we have a collective consciousness as well. And it's crazy. Like, you have individual consciousness, like an individual has their own identity and their own I, but as a society, you also have a collective consciousness. What's that? How would you explain that to someone?
To someone who has never delved into it before, how I would explain it. See, there are layers to reality. Let's talk about that. Okay, so there's like subjective reality where let me say that jazz music is better than rock music, right? That's my subjective reality. I think that, so it's true for me, right? That's the subjective reality. Then there is something called an intersubjective reality, which is truths that we share together. We created those truths and we share them.
Okay.
For example, let's say money. Just think of money as, it's, in a sense, it's actually just paper with some bits written on it. The government, I don't know, promises to pay the bearer so many rupees, whatever, right? It's basically just paper with some stuff written on it. But we consider it so much more than that, right? Yes. So the reality that money has is not really just in my mind or in your mind or in your sister's mind or in Freud's mind. It's within the collective consciousness of all of us, right? For example, there's another good example. Just before, let's say 3 years ago, none of us had heard of this term called COVID-19, coronavirus, right? But now this shift has happened, and COVID-19, coronavirus, masks, vaccines, all of these terms are within our collective consciousness, and they're never going away, right? Yeah. So in that sense, we all share a collective consciousness. All human beings share this collective consciousness, right? And then, apart from it, we started from subjective, we started from intersubjective, and then there's also something called objective reality, which is like true for everyone, irrespective of what we think, irrespective of what our opinions are. That's just true, right? Those things would be what I would call, again, they're a part of a collective consciousness, but they tend to be more in our unconscious, right? And that is the work which Carl Jung, if you've heard of his name, Carl Jung, he was also a psychologist, right? You've heard of his. So he talked a lot about the unconscious, and that our real work lies in bringing the unconscious into our consciousness, right? That's just fancy talk for becoming aware of what you're not aware of right now, right? So there are a lot of things that keep going on in your mind. For example, if you know how to drive, you don't really think about, after that has become, a pattern in you, you don't really think about how you're taking those right turns, those left turns, those U-turns. They just happen automatically, right? That's your unconscious, but that is your unconscious that you built within this life. There's also a lot of things going on underneath, which you didn't really create as such consciously, but they still happen within you, right? So those things are within your unconscious reality. But they are a part of your consciousness. You might not be aware of them, but they're a part of your consciousness, right?
And I don't know, was I correct in quoting, saying that Freud coined the term of collective consciousness? It could be Carl Jung also,
Could be.
Who knows?
Who cares, man? Who knows? I mean, Could have been either of them, could have been someone else too.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's not really get hung up on who started it, right? As long as we understand what the term means, who cares, right?
Yes, man. Who does care, man? Who
A
to
lot of people care,
engineer.
in fact.
Of course they
But
do. I get
uh,
I get this whole idea of calling it the most serious podcast.
mm, mm,
Sometimes people do actually take this very seriously. And
mm.
this is just a huge disclaimer that I just started it. I call it the most serious podcast in a more sarcastic manner. I don't want it to be very serious. I don't want the listeners to be very serious while listening to this. So you can just relax
Acha.
out on the details. And and you can also get the context of we are two engineering students, one certainly
Mm,
more senior to me, and we were
mm,
discussing philosophy, so we
mm.
are allowed to make some mistakes on quoting whether who was right and who coined this term or
Of
not.
course, of course. Anyway, so I talk a lot about philosophy and spirituality. So there's a lot of serious stuff on my podcast. Though I
Okay.
try to keep it kind of light, but the stuff that I talk about is still more serious. But I also try to refrain away from giving arguments from authority, as in this is something that was written in this particular book, so just believe it. This is something that was said by this particular person, so just believe it. I personally have never been a fan of those kinds of logical trails, and that is not how I like explaining things to people or even talking about things to people. So again, like what's there in the name? It's okay if we mess up calling Jung Freud or Freud Jung. It's okay.
Exactly, man. What's
Mm,
what's your take on like in general philosophy? Like what's your understanding? So see, for if someone asks me what is philosophy, then a stream of a name, the names of these people come along in my mind: Friedrich Nietzsche, Immanuel Kant,
mm,
or Freud, Young, I don't
mm,
know, maybe some more
mm, mm,
philosophers that I've heard of. So they also,
mm,
I,
mm,
I got introduced to philosophy through this I don't know, in a more literal sense, in a more academic sense. There's this podcast called Philosophize This by
ah,
Stephen
yeah.
West,
I think
I
I've
think.
seen that podcast. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Mm,
that's
mm,
so cool, man. I definitely
mm,
recommend anyone who's vaguely even interested in philosophy to check that out. But
mm,
so
mm,
I get all these authors in my mind. I get stuff that, something that has to do with your mind, something that has to do with how you think about things, why you think about these
mm,
things, and
mm,
mental models and everything. So what
mm,
does it
mm,
mean
mm.
for you?
That is a great question here. Philosophy at its very root, do you know what that word means? Philosophy.
I think philo
Like,
means to love or to be attracted
yeah,
to.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Sophia means wisdom. I think that these are Greek roots or Latin roots. Again, we
Okay.
are messing up between Greek and Latin, so whatever, right? So philosophy in essence means love for wisdom.
Okay.
And what that has come to mean over centuries of human beings interacting with each other and coining different terms, philosophy now, I think for me personally, philosophy means just a branch of understanding of reality, and that reality includes you, that reality includes the human mind, it includes nature. So everything that we study is actually a part of philosophy in that sense. It's basic that's what human endeavor is all about, right? Try to make more sense of the world, try to make more sense of yourself, of people around you, things of that sort. So that is what I mean when I talk about philosophy. To be
Hmm.
really honest, I've not really studied many of the authors that you were just talking about. I've read a lot of books, but I've not read books that you of the authors that you were talking about. So I never really approach philosophy from the angle of what all authors have I read, what all philosophers have I read, right? I approach philosophy from the angle of what expands my horizon of understanding of reality, of understanding of the universe or my mind or human mind in general. And I read through a lot of different people and kind of became a philosopher myself. Love wisdom, love understanding. So, yeah.
I think, yeah, what happens with me, Chetan, is I don't know if you relate to this or not. Tell me a
Mm,
solution to this, maybe, or even if you relate to this, I would find it more relaxing
mm,
that people are like me. So
mm,
I have sometimes I wouldn't call myself an avid reader, but I have
mhm,
read certain books that I do find interesting. I do listen to podcasts sometimes, and also
mm,
go on the hunt for wisdom whenever I feel like I'm that much curious. But
Mm-hmm.
what happens is that when you're in that zone of reading something, or when you're in that zone of listening to a podcast, or maybe someone talk about some philosophy or how to live your life, maybe, or some mental models, for lack of a
Mm-hmm.
better word, in that
Mm-hmm.
moment, in that zone, you're able to make sense of all of what is being said to you or what you're reading out. But as that moment
Mm-hmm.
passes away, and
Mm-hmm.
you get to engage in real life again, you now
Mm-hmm.
have to complete that assignment, and you now have to report to whatever, 8 a.m. on a Monday morning, 9 a.m., whatever, to a college class,
Yeah.
or you have to go to your jobs, or you have to
Yeah.
reply to that email. Then all of that fades away,
Mm-hmm.
man. It just doesn't carry. Why doesn't
Mm-hmm.
it carry? What wrong am I doing? And does that happen to everyone?
Of course it does, man. Why do you think you're any different from others? It happens to everyone. One, I actually have two things I want to say about that. One
Okay.
thing is, have you worked out ever? Have you been
Yeah.
into a gym and,
Yeah.
lifted weights and all,
Yeah.
So if you're lifting weights and you're doing a lot of that hard work in the gym, but you're
Yeah.
not resting, it
Yeah.
doesn't work out, right? It
Hmm.
doesn't apply to your body. You don't get those gains, or you don't
Of
really,
course.
feel that much stronger, right?
Hmm.
It's the same thing with even philosophy and reading books. You can read, you can listen to a lot of podcasts, but if you're not meditating, consider meditation to be that rest where 1 plus 1 actually becomes 2, where all the different books that you've read actually, join together, and the neuroplasticity in your brain actually happens. You have to rest for that.
Hmm.
This is something that I found out in my personal experience, because I totally relate to what you're saying, dude. I was reading a lot of books and I was kind of expecting them to just drastically change me.
Yeah.
You're supposed to do the work on your own, and
Hmm.
that work involves meditation. And also, so when I'm comparing meditation to resting, I'm not really saying just passively meditate. You can also consciously meditate. One thing that I recommend to everyone, whoever my clients that work with me, and even anyone who listens to my podcast would know, that I recommend just sitting and observing the stream of your thoughts, because that is when. So let's say you're reading this book, Thinking Fast and Slow,
Yeah.
and when you would go through it, you would see a lot of different chapters where he would talk about different kinds of cognitive biases, right?
Hmm.
Let's say he talks about confirmation bias, where it's almost like, you kind of try to focus on things that confirm your preconceived notions about other things, right?
Okay.
That's basically confirmation bias. So if you've read that chapter, that's fine, you've understood it. But when you're meditating and when you're thinking, when you're letting your thoughts flow, you can actually try and see, oh, this is where I had applied confirmation bias, this is where that confirmation bias had got me. It was not really true, but because of confirmation bias, this is how my mind was working. And before you know it, you have unlearned that pattern, because you just became aware of it, right?
Hmm.
So what I'm trying to tell you is, there is this piece of advice I would give to everyone: ki read a lot of books, listen to a lot of podcasts, consume really good content, but also meditate on it. Like, consciously think about how it applies to your life. Consciously think of how your thoughts can actually be aligned with what you just read or what you just consumed. That is the work. That is the real work that everyone needs to do. Hmm?
That makes sense, man. That actually
Hmm.
makes sense, and I'll definitely try it out, and I'll also
Hmm.
let you know how the results of it were,
Definitely.
and I'll ask you for
Yeah.
another solution if this doesn't work.
Definitely. Definitely.
One day I was thinking, like, randomly just sitting, or before going to sleep, just a thought came to my mind. Sometimes we watch movies, sometimes events happen in a life, sometimes someone says something, and
Yeah.
some part of that sentence, or maybe sometimes a part of a story or a movie dialogue, or lyrics of a song, just get randomly
Hmm.
stuck with you in your mind without any
Yeah.
effort or without any conscious action to be aware of it,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it just stays there. And
Hmm. Hmm.
you don't need any active memory for
Hmm. Hmm.
having to remember it. Why does that
Yeah.
happen? Do you have any idea? It's just a crazy thought, man. Any inputs from your end on it? I was wondering about it. I see randomly.
Mm. Yeah, I think it. So the moment when that happens, if I tell you about something personal from my side,
Ah.
this happened to me very recently. My wife was actually away on. She was staying at her parents' house, and we had been away for some time. and I was definitely missing her, right? At that moment, a song about a guy missing his girlfriend, missing his wife, is gonna resonate with me a lot more, right? And that happened with me. And that
Right.
song, what was the name of that song? See, I've forgotten it now.
Okay.
It's gonna come to me.
Don't tell this to your wife.
Damn it. Arey dude, I was about to tell you ki when I listened to that song, Nasha is the name of that song.
Okay.
It's a Punjabi song and lovely lyrics, man. I mean, beautiful lyrics. And I actually forwarded that to my wife at that time when I was thinking about that song. And she doesn't understand Punjabi, I do. So I actually explained the lyrics also to her.
Okay.
Right. And that song had been playing in my mind for quite a lot of time. So
Yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to say is ki the reasons might not really be very objective. They're going to be very subjective reasons. So if a song, if a book, if a particular section of a song, a particular section of a movie is resonating with you, maybe that is trying to tell you something about what you are experiencing in your life right now, right? It might be something that is unconscious.
Yeah.
होता है, right? I mean, जैसे मैंने अभी एग्जांपल दिया, if you are kind of in that relationship, in a relationship state where
yes.
let's say someone went through a bad breakup, उस time पे all those KK songs, all those old
lyrics
songs,
makes a lot of
hit,
sense.
the lyrics make a lot of sense. Exactly. So उस time पे, so it's basically this, right? I mean, it's subjective, of course, what you're going through right now colors whatever other things you're perceiving, right? So उस sense में I think I would make sense of that in this manner.
Bro, you feel you know, you look very patient and you look a very calm-headed guy. And I want to know this reason behind this patience. Like, how do you also, like, on this subject, because we're talking about philosophy, spirituality, and all these heavy terms, and they require a lot of patience. I never think of myself as a guy who can have patience, you know, who can stick with activities for a long enough period, you know, to get to where the actual fruit is. But sometimes I look at people and I see this, that there's no need to hurry. And talking to you makes me feel that you're the kind of that guy only. That, you know, you're calm, you're patient, you're chill, you're in your zone. And that's kind of the patience that's required to, I guess, read about philosophy or these subjects, man. Because there are so many contradictory ideals when you read one book or one author or any ideology that people had. So there's so many contradictions. How do you keep that patience to go on and still figure out more?
Beautiful, yeah. You know, when I was reading this book, Sapiens, have you heard of Sapiens?
I've heard of Sapiens. Yeah, I've heard about it. I haven't read it, but yeah.
So in that book, this guy was talking about, I don't think I'd ever thought of this before Sapiens, but us book mein, he was talking about how there are all of these different animals on the planet, and human beings are the one who rule over all the planet, right?
Yeah.
And one primary reason for that is actually language. It's actually, we see dogs converse in some sense. They tell each other things, barking or biting or whatever, right? They send signals to each other. Cats do, all the different animals would. But I think human beings are the only animals who can transmit ideas even after they're gone, right? I.e. books. Our podcast is going to be here even in the year 2100 if there's still internet around, whatever, right? So in that sense, human beings can transmit ideas even after they've died, even after they're no more here. So that really fascinated me so much ki I didn't need any other motivation other than just this ki I can actually talk to the dead in some sense. I can actually understand, I can actually listen to what they were thinking, right? So it's just beautiful. So you don't need any external motivation to actually, you know, read these kinds of things. And for me personally, just say people have asked me this before, my friends actually do. And I just tell them, Erki, if you need an external push to make you read books, I'm not going to do that, because God knows we're anyway doing so many things which we don't really want to, and we're forcing ourselves to do them. Our jobs, our careers, I don't know what all. Kar hi rahe hum cheezein jo, you know, you're not really motivated about. And then here comes Chetan, and he's now pushing you to even read more books and taking away even more fun out of your life. I'm not going to do that. So I don't like to give more motivation ki aur books padho. Rather, for me, what worked, I try to say that. And this is what I'm saying. Ki this idea ki human beings have reached this particular point in our civilization, this particular point in our consciousness via this idea of transmuting ideas, why this idea of transmuting thoughts. And kitna fascinating hai. I mean, there's this Russian author called Fyodor Dostoevsky. I had
Notes from
never
the
heard of
Underground.
this guy. Yes. Oh, you've read him? You've read him?
I read Notes of the Underground. I think I've read
Achha.
again. I've read 45 odd pages of it. I don't know why I left
Achha.
it in the middle.
Wow. Beautiful author here. I mean,
Yeah.
I heard of him from Osho, and Osho talked about his book Brothers Karamazov. And जब मैंने वो book पढ़ी यार, it's a 700 or 800 pages book, and it was so much detail. पहले the first 400 pages, I think the story had progressed only a single day or 2 days. Can you imagine the level of detail that could be there in that book? I mean, just on the surface, when I realized after, it blew my mind away. And the fact that I could go through that book, I could go through that experience, was just fascinating for me. I mean, it's a beautiful time to be alive if you can read such books, if you can listen to such podcasts. Up to jaise you don't even have to read books, you can actually go through podcasts now. So this is the new thing of our generation ki, I talk a lot about ye point na, I try to make a lot ki we live in an age where if you say you do not have good resources to actually understand life better, understand humans better, understand yourself better, you just don't know enough, क्योंकि इतना सब कुछ है freely available. Like my podcast is freely available. It's right, you are talking about so many things, there are so many other podcasts, there are so many books that are available. So we live in the age जहाँ पे you should not be needing external motivation to force you to try to expand your horizon. It will just happen by itself. It should just happen by itself. So and if you talk about me being a patient guy, a calm guy, that happened as a result of all of this. Aisa nahi tha ki I was always the calm-headed, patient dude. So, like I told you, ki there was a lot of dissatisfaction in my life, and I was trying to figure things out. And one of the basic utilities that I saw from actually understanding things better was this idea ki I could really just declutter my mind. Like you were talking about, when you meditate and you could see ki there's just so much chatter happening, and you know that this is not serving you, but somehow you just can't stop it, right? So, but if you pursue and if you really just work on yourself, it does go away. It does go away, because that is, I think I can also say that is just how our bodies are designed. We are designed to optimally function. And if there are all these disturbing thoughts popping up into your head, and you just realize ki they're not based on truth, or they're not really serving you well, over time, those thoughts do reduce in volume and intensity too. That just happens automatically, right? So you become calm, you become patient. You are always a work in progress, and this is actually the work that is worth the candle. We should be doing this. So I think this must be motivation enough to actually go for it. Hai kya?
Hey man, obviously. Now you've read these so many books, and you look like an avid reader. Do you have any short stories or ऐसी कुछ nuggets of wisdom जो sometimes so I heard a story जिसमें I'm sure you must have also heard this, थोड़ी सी folklore type ही है, and it's also pretty famous कि there's this farmer or a person who has the cattle and a set of horses. So one day, have you heard this?
Maybe वाली story है ना, maybe.
हाँ, maybe.
Yeah.
That's
Brilliant
so cool,
story,
man.
That's
Brilliant
so cool.
story, and they get stuck with you, and they remind you that life is just so subjective, and life is just so open to interpretation.
Yeah, very true. In fact, pata hai, on my Instagram channel, I started sharing these stories, and funnily so, this was the first story I had shared. the maybe
Oh
story.
man,
So
that's so cool.
that was the first story I'd shared, and I've also pinned it on my profile now. I used to love that story. तो
Yeah, that's
उसी तरीके से there are
amazing.
so many other Zen stories. अगर आप कभी देखना चाहो ना, if you want to search, just you can go onto my Instagram and just go through those Zen stories. I created a
Mm-hmm.
highlight also अलग से उनके लिए.
Sure, sure, sure.
So some real beautiful and just poignant, potent stuff जो within a few minutes आपको just makes you think deeper.
Mm.
So if I give you one such story, abhi very recently I was telling this to another friend. I won't really tell ki kya context tha, but
Mm-hmm.
the story was centered around peace.
Okay.
And what that story was about, ki there was once a king who organized a competition within his kingdom of the best artwork on peace, right? So there are multiple versions of this story. Some tell ki there was a king who organized, some say there was a teacher who organized. जो
Okay.
भी ले लो. So let's just say कि there was a king who organized a big competition talking and he wanted to reward someone who would depict peace in the best possible manner. So there were submissions from all over the kingdom, even other cities and all. काफी submissions आए, and everyone was expecting this one particular painting to win, which had just the most serene lake, the most serene, calm environment and everything. And the king surprised everyone by actually picking a piece of art which was not at all looking peaceful. Matlab, there was a hailstorm, there was ऐसे तूफान आ रहा है, and there's just too much rain and a lot of wind and everything.
Okay.
And everyone was shocked ki why did this painting win?
Yeah.
And this guy explained ki all you saw was this painting. What you did not see was there was this tree, and on the branch of this tree there was a mother bird sitting very calmly with her son and just holding her. That is peace, right? A point kya hai story ka ki almost all of us want peace to mean external silence. Say there should be zero noise, or at least minimum possible noise from the outside, and sab ekdam calm and serene hona chahiye. While real peace is actually here. It's the calmness that you feel inside you, right? That is what this story means to me personally. That is what I always tell to people ki we all want peaceful world. We all want a peaceful world, but we are not peaceful within ourselves. So if, like we were talking about having a calm mind, having a decluttered mind, if you are yourself, your internal dialogue is messed up, and you don't feel peaceful within you, even if you were to go to a very peaceful environment jahan pe there is serenity, there is calmness, it is that disturbed mind that is going there. It will not be able to extract the nectar out of that peace. So real peace starts from within. That's step number 1. That's peace 101. And this is one story that क्योंकि ये थोड़ा बैठ भी गया in what we were saying.
Beautiful
right?
story, man. Beautiful. And I'm sure ये तो will definitely remember this. And this is one of those things again, won't need to make an active effort to remember this. Just resonates so much, and makes a lot of sense. Makes so much sense. Sometimes I feel that whenever we're talking about all of this stuff, like making changes and changing the world, achieving things, doing things for the world to look at us and applaud and say, "Ki, this man lived a good life" or whatever. And I read this quote maybe from there was this guy, you must have definitely heard of him, Lao Tzu.
Lao
I don't
Tzu.
know how. Lao Tzu,
yeah. Lao Tzu is how you pronounce
and he was the founder of Taoism. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that
correctly. Yeah. That is Zen Buddhism, basically. What I was saying, Zen stories.
Their philosophy is so simple. This philosophy is just so, just go with the flow and be at peace with yourself. Everything starts from yourself. Don't worry about the world outside, man. A lot of it, a lot of this world is actually up here, man. And we talked about consciousness early on, and you just said that the things that you get aware of defines, kind of your consciousness. If you're conscious of that act or that thing happening, then that makes you conscious of it, and that expands your consciousness.
Exactly. And that's jaise maine bola na, that's step 1. That step 1 is it's finding peace within yourself. And after that, you resume your external work again, right? If you want to fix the world, fix yourself first, and then go on fixing the world, because God knows, we all know that the world needs fixing, but we need fixed individuals to fix the world, right? We cannot have messed up minds just doing the same things that other people have already done, right? Of course we are always progressing. I mean, it's just a tautology, I would say, that we are progressing and we are progressing towards a better world. But एक ये चीज, this dissatisfaction, that lack that every human being feels, it's always put out externally. First, that lack has to be solved internally. If you, say, I was talking about that story, one quote that I derived from that story, I share a lot on my Instagram, is that you don't resolve all conflicts to become peaceful. You realize peace within yourself, and then you resolve all your conflicts, right? However, almost all of us are designed in this manner. Our default ways of thinking are designed in this manner to try and point out that this person did this situation did this situation is the one to blame, and that is why I'm in this situation. I mean, what I'm trying to say is it's always external facing. While if you have done enough inner work, you would realize that your first work lies within you. Uske baad, there is definitely external work to do. No one is denying that. The world needs fixed people to fix the world, right? So,
and the idea
that is in fact,
you know what kind of this whole conversation brings me to the idea that how well it is marketed and sold, that external peace, buy these things and you'll be peaceful. Go on that vacation and you'll be peaceful. I think most of the I don't know, capitalistic industry is based out of it or not, but so they're selling peace very, very, very good. And just this idea of having that, you'll once you get this, once you buy this, once you're here, then you become peaceful, and then it solves all of your problems. And that makes it very, very attractive, because you think that ki, once I go to Bali, Indonesia, and sit on that swing jahan pe Instagram pe sab photos dal rahe, and then on that swing I'll forget all of my problems, and that's peace.
Yeah. And one thing, what you're saying is absolutely right. This is how it's being sold. But one thing that we miss out when we say this is also that it is being sold by people who also are already sold on this idea. It's not that those people are away from this idea. It's very rare that you actually have people who are free from this idea and then they sell this. It's always going to be the same kinds of people. So that's why I keep on saying, we need fixed minds to fix the world. These ideas are being sold by people who are sold on these ideas themselves. Tabhi they are selling these ideas. It's not always crooked minds, trying to deceive you. These are deceived individuals themselves, right? Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Of course, man.
Right? Yeah, you're absolutely right in what you're saying. In fact, there's this very beautiful book called Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Agar aapne suna, Robert Persig is the author, and one of the quotes that he shared there was, the only Zen, the only peace you find on the top of mountains is the peace you take there with you.
That's right? Mind-blowing.
That's exactly what we were talking about. So if there's inner peace, you can go to a noisy place and feel peaceful. But if there is enough disturbance within your mind, enough cluttering in your mind, you can go to the most serene lake and still find some trouble or the other. So you're absolutely right in saying that we have been sold this idea of peace in the manner of some external situation, some external thing fixing us, but it's also being sold to us by people who are themselves sold on this idea. And we need to stop really focusing on those people too, right? Inner work.
Man, this conversation feels like I don't know. Is this what therapy feels like? You sit there, you talk, and you listen, and you just sit and contemplate. Yeah.
This is it. This is all of what I have done myself. This is what I do with my clients too. Of course, the sessions that I take with people one-on-one, it's more personal, it's more individualistic. So, right. But the overall theme is this, right? You kind of rewire your understanding of the world in some sense. I talk about unlearning. So unlearning, it's also kind of the same thing. I don't mean you purposefully forget something that doesn't work, but unlearning means let go of those sticky attachments. Till if you are someone who's focused on fixing the world, let go of it, fix yourself, and then you will find avenues on how you have to fix the world around you, right? So it involves unlearning as the first step. And then, there's this, I don't know if I heard this in the Bhagavad Gita, or it's a beautiful quote centered around Hinduism, where it says, root yourself in yoga, root yourself in your place in the world, and then go about doing what is right. Not the other way around. This order is important. Agar aap, for example, you get a kid and you just tell them ki do whatever feels right. That kid is always just going to eat chocolates and candies and just going to get fat and unhealthy, right? You don't say that to kids. So very similarly, you unlearn what is not serving you. You declutter your mind. You understand life better. And then you do what feels right. This therapy, right?
And also, like so one of my friends recently told me about how he read the Bhagavad Gita, and he was kind of fascinated with so many modern day problems like anxiety. I think that's a wrong way to maybe address it, modern day problems, but sometimes problems that we often find ourselves dealing with on a constant basis in the modern day. Things like anxiety, and these are like loosely thrown around words, so people don't definitely, I don't know, medically know the meaning of anxiety, or maybe they just use it for whenever they're feeling a state of panic or whatever, and it says right behind you, don't panic. But so he talked about like how Bhagavad Gita has some answers to almost each of these feelings of distraught, confusion, pain, and whatnot. And I started reading a couple of chapters myself, and I always struggle with this idea of if everything is predestined, and if everything happens the way it has to happen, then why work at all? Don't work, don't worry about anything. Everything will be all right, and everything will take care of its own. And so I just never could find the answer to this ideology. I just thought, yeah, anyone who tries to make me believe apart from this is trying to is have their own ideologies. But I was just never accepting of this fact that if everything is predestined, then why does one have to do hard things? Why can't you always have pleasure in your life? And so in Bhagavad Gita, I don't know if this is like literally correct or not, but my interpretation of it made sense to me. That so Arjun asks Bhagwan Krishna that again, why should I do any of this when you control everything, and I don't need to do. So there was this conversation that he asked, then why should I do anything? And he says, Krishna says that don't, once you let go of this attachment of results and everything, then don't also let yourself get attached to not wanting to work. So so what we do unconsciously is, once we get we say ki get detached from the results, get detached from the worldly desires or everything, but then simultaneously you get, like me, for myself, I get attached to not working. So that is also in some sense meta desire, so that's definitely crazy. Like unconsciously I'm getting attached to not working, and I feel that idea is good.
And you've hit the nail on the head, man. This is it. So let me try and explain it to you just a bit more. So when you say that everything is predestined, what do you think is actually doing all the work? What do you think is fixing things, or what do you think is doing the work? I think if you go deeper into it, you would say nature does it, right? Naturally sab ho jayega. Naturally everything gets fixed, right? Naturally everything just works out naturally.
Yeah.
We are nature. We are a part of that nature, right? We are not separate from that nature. So if you, let's say, in fact, this was kind of the theme of my latest podcast episode. I was talking about rebirth and karma. And this is one thing that everyone really gets stuck on. Ki, everything that has happened with me in my previous lives and all of that has led me here. And it's all a predestined model. Have you ever played pool, the game of pool?
Yeah.
You would have at least known that pool or billiards, right? Yeah. So it's like there is at any point of time in that game of pool or billiards, the balls on the table, the configuration that is on the table is because of all the different shots that have been played so far, right?
True.
It's just a tautology. That's just true.
Yeah.
But the real nectar of the entire understanding of karma is that the next shot, if you are the player, the next shot is in your hand. You are responsible for that shot. Play that shot, man. Play that shot. Play that shot to the best of your abilities. You're not detached from the nature that is doing all of these predestined things. Of course you're not. You're a part of that nature. But human beings are slightly different than other animals. जैसे animals में ऐसा होता है कि they don't get to consciously choose things. Human beings can choose things, right?
Right.
I'll come to that in a bit more detail. But to your answer of if everything is predestined, why should I do anything? You are also predestined to do the damn work now, right? That is a part of the predestined.
Yeah, of
मतलब
course.
and जैसे आपने बोला, if you were to choose to not play the game, not playing the game is also a part of playing the game.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
just true. Yeah.
Yes.
So and it's gonna work itself out anyway. If you're not gonna play the game, if let's say we were playing billiards and Ripu just says, oh, I'm not gonna play anymore. Yeah, you're not a good player, I'm not going to play with you, and you walk out of the room, I'll have to find another player to finish the game, or I'll have to imitate you to play the game. The game will go on, right? Might as well join it, might as well play it consciously, might as well have some fun while playing it, right? So when I was talking about human beings being different than animals, this is where human beings are different. You can actually make conscious choices. But again, step 101 of making conscious choices is being aware of your own thoughts, is being aware of your own mind. If you do not think how you think, you keep on making unconscious choices. That's how almost everyone works. But if you're aware enough of your own choices, you can make conscious choices, right? So life is almost like a tree, there are all of these branches going on in all different directions. And again, at every single point, it can go either in this direction or this direction or this direction. There can be dozens of directions you take. If this is an animal on this junction, it cannot really make a conscious choice. Its nature is going to throw it to one particular direction and see where it goes. And the branch goes on. If it's a human being, of course, there is an element of nature, but there's also an element of free choice. You can make those conscious choices, right? जैसे आपने बोला, I'm going to make the consciousness of not playing the game. Go on, make that choice. It's going to change how it goes on from here, right? Similarly, you can also make the conscious choice of playing the game to the best of your ability. Which do you think is a more potent choice? It's a no-brainer. Play to the best of your ability, right? So, yeah.
The crux of it all, man, these moments when, and similarly, like talking to you, I've had moments in this conversation as well where I just stepped back and thought about, how the way I think about things, and all of it's just once you taste it, you kind of get to know why people spend their time on ideas, philosophies, and they try to learn more about them. And you have to get that taste. You have to get that one sip of this, this
from
realization.
This cup of wisdom.
Yeah. Exactly. It could be through meditation. It could be through reading a text or listening a podcast. But that initial effort, well, once you get the taste of it, then you start to realize that how much more of your life you've been living unconsciously.
Exactly. So, when I was starting my podcast, my first episode was about introducing the podcast. And I was talking about there are two things that every adult should question at some point in their lives. And those two things are, what have you assumed and what have you missed out? Right? These two things, they're very important to question. But it's basically just this here. What have you assumed? I mean, what mental models are going into everything, how you're viewing the world, what all is just assumption, what all is not true, right? And the second thing is, what have you missed out? Because if you really understand, we do not know what we do not know, right? That's just tautology again. You do not know what you do not know. So if you want to expand your horizons, you have to question what you missed out. So these two things, usually, because we are going on in this tree of life, jaise maine bola na, if you're not aware of your own thoughts, you are also one of those animals who is just, nature is pushing in different branches, and life keeps on going. But if you want to actually extract the juice out of human life, you have to step back at some point and question your own thoughts, understand your own thoughts. And if you're doing that, uske liye, because there is so much noise in our everyday life, in this modern world especially, there's just so much noise and so many things to achieve here. I mean, it's just almost impossible for someone to really take a step back themselves. I think I was lucky ki it happened with me just naturally, kind of naturally. But I started this podcast with the aim of being that trigger, like what you're talking about right now.
Yeah.
No? Within this conversation, you have felt a lot of times that you need to step back and really just think. This is the single biggest aim of my podcast. To serve as the trigger to people that, there are a lot of things that we assume, there are a lot of things that we miss out. Let me be that trigger. And if you want to delve into it deeper, I'm also available to delve into it deeper on a one-on-one basis also. Right. So,
Amazing, man. Never thought that we would be able to talk about all of this stuff with making sense. Keeping track of this conversation and taking it somewhere. But I personally enjoyed a lot and didn't expect it to go this deep, but definitely enjoyed it, man. I don't know how was your experience, but love this conversation, Chetan.
I loved it too, Ripu. You're a very open host, you're a very engaging host, and you have this ability to really let the conversation go on while also retaining it back. So, aisa bhi na ho, because I try to not go on in too many tangents, but it can still happen. And you were that kind of a host who would rein me back too. So I loved it too.
And this calls for another. Definitely will have you again on the podcast. I think there's a lot of stuff that we can talk about. Love the work that you are doing. Chetan is the host of the Unlearning Playground podcast, and it is available on almost every major platform. Go listen to him. He has really crafty ideas about life, and you might have gotten a taste of them here. I just enjoyed it, man.
Thank you so much, Ripu. I loved it too, man. This was a great experience.
Thanks for being on the show, Chetan. Take care, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you, dude. Take care too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.